Marcus glanced at me. The satisfaction plain on his face. 18 months of work at your neighborhood just helped us take down one of the most sophisticated suburban criminal networks we've ever seen. Valerie's final act of defiance was a call to someone she referred to only as the banker, instructing them to liquidate all accounts and prepare for evacuation. But her timing was off as the federal net had already closed. At Marcus's signal, the community center doors burst open. 8 agents swept in through 3 entrances, their movements perfectly coordinated to block escape and protect evidence. "Valerie King," announced the lead officer, Special Agent Sarah Chen, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, large-scale insurance fraud, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise." The sight of Valerie in handcuffs before hundreds of neighbors and 3 news crews was the kind of justice most communities never see. But the true scope of her crimes only became clear when Agent Chen read the full list of charges: conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, laundering drug profits through property management companies, extorting elderly residents, and channeling roughly $2.3 million in illicit funds into fraudulent real estate deals. The case revealed an elaborate operation spanning 4 states, where upscale HOAs served as a front for inflating real estate values and cleaning drug money. Valerie's fraud was only one piece of a larger puzzle, one that included sham property managers, corrupt insurance adjusters, and a carefully engineered pipeline for moving dirty cash into respectable-looking investments. This network started in Florida retirement communities, Agent Chen explained, but Lakewood Hills was their boldest expansion into traditional family neighborhoods. Marcus dropped his undercover act, laying out the scope of the investigation. For 18 months, agents had been embedded in 6 communities connected to the ring. My GPS tracking system, combined with Patricia Murphy's evidence, had provided the final proof linking street-level drug proceeds to suburban real estate deals. In an unexpected twist, Jake Miller's salvage yard had been quietly serving as an unwitting evidence repository. Every car Valerie sent there was photographed, documented, and traced back to its rightful owner, creating a perfect, years-long paper trail of stolen vehicles disguised as HOA enforcement. Then came the moment of absurd comedy. As agents cataloged Valerie's belongings, they found fake IDs and credit cards belonging to 3 elderly residents she'd driven from their homes. When asked to explain, Valerie's only response was to demand access to a bathroom, apparently thinking she could flush away evidence like a cornered petty thief. "Ma'am," Agent Chen said with a trace of dry amusement, "we've already seized every device, record, and piece of communication equipment tied to your operation. And for the record, the FBI doesn't allow suspects to accidentally destroy evidence in a restroom." Outside, the parking lot had transformed into something straight out of a primetime crime drama. Specialized FBI evidence recovery trucks rolled in, flanked by computer forensics teams who immediately began combing through Valerie's seized electronics. Nearby, financial crimes investigators addressed residents, explaining how they could document their losses for federal restitution claims. This investigation has already led to the seizure of over $18 million in assets, real estate, vehicles, and bank accounts, Chen announced, and we expect that number to grow as we continue dismantling their financial network. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Jake Miller pulled up in his tow truck, this time proudly displaying a banner that read, "Justice served, a federal asset recovery operation." As Valerie sat handcuffed in the back of an FBI SUV, Jake winched her immaculate white Mercedes onto the truck bed. The collective cheer from the crowd was almost as satisfying as the news that the vehicle itself had been purchased with laundered drug money, making it fair game for permanent federal forfeiture. Valerie's downfall rippled far beyond Lakewood Hills. While we stood there, agents were executing coordinated search warrants at King Realty, 3 property management companies, and the offices of 2 insurance adjusters tied to fraudulent claims. This, Marcus told Laney's now 50,000 strong livestream audience, is what a full-scale takedown of a continuing criminal enterprise looks like. Shutting her down here means stopping this operation before it could spread to dozens of other neighborhoods. But the most chilling detail emerged when federal forensic accountants revealed the true financial damage Valerie had caused. Over the past 3 years, Property values in Lakewood Hills had been deliberately suppressed by about 12%, a loss of nearly $2.8 million in equity spread across the entire community. Even those who had never dealt with Valerie directly had been victims. Worse still, investigators uncovered early plans to expand the scheme into school districts, fabricating safety hazards and infrastructure failures to trigger municipal bond issues that could then be exploited for laundering. "You didn't just stop neighborhood harassment," Marcus told me quietly. "You stopped the start of municipal-level fraud that could have hit thousands of families." The crowning moment came when Patricia Murphy, once a retired insurance investigator, now a neighborhood HOA, was named the primary witness coordinator for the federal prosecution. Mrs. Murphy's work shaved at least 6 months off our investigation, Agent Chen announced to Applause. Her meticulous records will be critical in securing convictions. As agents packed away the last crates of seized evidence, the scope of the victory became clear. 23 families were preparing federal restitution claims. King Realty was being dismantled under asset forfeiture laws, and property tax adjustments would be issued to offset the years of artificially lowered home values. Valerie King's empire was gone. She left Lakewood Hills in the back of a federal SUV, her Mercedes following close behind on Jake's tow truck, heading for a secure impound lot. But the real triumph wasn't the arista, it was the transformation of the neighborhood itself. We had gone from a collection of isolated, intimidated residents to a united front that fought back and won. 2 years later, I found myself standing inside the Patricia Murphy Vintage Car Museum, watching a group of elementary school kids learn about the power of standing up to bullies. The museum occupied what had once been one of Valerie's vehicle storage warehouses, and now beautifully restored and home to 47 classic cars Patricia had recovered from fraud cases across 4 states. Each car's placard told the story of a family who refused to stay silent, helping to dismantle a criminal network in the process. The poetic irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same building Valerie once used to hide stolen property was now a place where children learned about courage, justice, and the strength of a community that refused to be broken. The federal case against the Lakewood Hills money laundering ring became a benchmark in suburban white-collar crime enforcement. Valerie King was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison and ordered to repay $8.4 million to the communities and families she had harmed. Her sprawling property management network, operating across 12 states, was dismantled entirely, leading to 43 more arrests and the recovery of over $20 million in stolen assets. The Department of Justice adopted the case as a training model for agents learning how to detect sophisticated criminal enterprises that hide behind legitimate business fronts. Marcus Williams, promoted to senior special agent after the investigation, partnered with the Cole Foundation for Community Justice to create educational programs for homeowner associations across the nation. The Lakewood Hills case proved organized crime isn't confined to city streets, Marcus told a room full of law enforcement professionals. Increasingly, these networks target suburban areas where residents may lack the tools to recognize fraud until the damage is done. His presentation featuring footage from Laney's investigative documentary was viewed by more than 2 million officers and community leaders. The neighborhood itself experienced a dramatic turnaround. Once the artificial market manipulation was eliminated, property values bounced back, rising an average of 18% for residents whose equity had been suppressed. A completely new HOA board was elected, with Patricia Murphy serving as president emeritus, ensuring the community ran transparently. Formerly dull home meetings were now packed with engaged residents eager to participate in decision-making. Laney's film, Junkyard Justice: How One Neighborhood Fought Back, won an Emmy for Outstanding Investigative Journalism and generated $3.2 million for victim assistance programs. Distributed to thousands of community groups, it sparked similar investigations in other neighborhoods where residents suspected systemic fraud. The greatest lesson, Laney said on her national speaking tour, is that everyday people have extraordinary power when they stand together and refuse to be silenced. The Patricia Murphy Scholarship Fund, funded through documentary proceeds and restitution, covered full tuition for 50 students pursuing degrees in law enforcement, criminal justice, and community advocacy. Patricia, then 79, served as the program's director, personally mentoring recipients. I spent 4 decades investigating fraud, she told the scholarship winners, but my most important case was the one I solved alongside neighbors who wouldn't give up. Cole Classic Restoration grew into a 12-location franchise, each shop combining expert car restoration with community education. The original Lakewood Hills site became a destination for classic car fans, not just for its craftsmanship but for the powerful story behind it. Every vehicle we restore carries part of our community's history, I told visitors, and each customer becomes part of a network committed to defending their neighbors. The FBI's investigation revealed Valerie's operation was part of a growing trend of organized crime targeting older suburban populations with limited police resources. In response, a dedicated suburban financial crimes task force was established in our region, using our case as a blueprint for citizen engagement and fraud prevention. Perhaps the most profound change was in how neighbors related to one another. The Lakewood Truth Alliance, born during the crisis, became a permanent fixture, meeting monthly to address local issues and coordinate mutual aid. Families who once barely exchanged greetings now work together on neighborhood safety, youth mentorship, and other initiatives. What once threatened to fracture the community had, in the end, strengthened it beyond recognition. When Patricia passed away peacefully, her will revealed that she donated her entire classic car collection to establish a museum in her name. More than that, she outlined plans for it to serve as a training center for grassroots investigators who could spot and document financial crimes in their own towns. The dedication plaque reads, "Every community needs a Patricia Murphy, someone willing to ask the hard questions and never stop fighting for justice." Today, children visit the museum to learn about courage and civic duty, surrounded by vehicles that symbolize both greed and the triumph of justice. At its center stands the fully restored Ford Mustang Boss 429 that Valerie once tried to destroy. Its placard telling the story of GPS tracking, community unity, and federal collaboration that brought down a criminal empire. As I locked up the museum one evening, a text from Jake Milra, now head of vehicle acquisition and restoration, came through. "Ethan, the FBI just recovered 3 more vintage cars from a similar case in Phoenix. They want them in Patricia's collection. Looks like we'll need more space." I smiled, knowing Patricia's legacy would continue. One rescued car, one educated neighborhood at a time. Protecting communities from those who exploit trust. Lakewood Hills had gone from a neighborhood under siege to a model of collective resistance, from scattered victims to organized defenders, and from a petty HOA dispute to a case that reshaped how suburban crime is fought. Valerie King had thought she was destroying a car. Instead, she ignited a movement that would safeguard neighborhoods for generations. This story stands as proof that no criminal empire is beyond the reach of ordinary people who stand together. Valerie may have tried to silence one voice, but she awakened an entire community that refused to back down. Justice found its way through determination, cooperation, and the belief that no bully is untouchable. "Why are you parked here?" The words came out as a shriek before Karina Valerie King, but she had that unmistakable care and energy. I swung a tire iron into the hood of the brand new car I had just driven home from the showroom yesterday. The deafening crunch of glass and metal hit me like a punch to the ears. In an instant, $40,000 worth of dreams turned into glittering debris on my driveway. What she didn't realize was that, before the day was over, the whole neighborhood would witness her precious white Mercedes being hauled straight to the junkyard. And that was only the first act. I was holding something far more destructive than any tire iron, something that could knock her right off the HOA throne she'd guarded for years. My name's Ethan Cole. Just 8 months ago, I was another out-of-work engineer and unemployed because I refused to sign off on a rigged safety inspection. I'd spent years in industrial rescue, seen firsthand what happened when people cut corners. So when my boss tried to push me into rubber stamping faulty equipment, I walked. The unemployment benefits had run dry 3 months back. My savings looked like a bad political promise, and foreclosure was breathing down my neck. That's when I decided to gamble everything on my garage hobby, Cole Classic Restoration, specializing in bringing vintage muscle cars back to life. The 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429 in my driveway wasn't just any project. It was my lifeline, my chance to get back on my feet. The owner, Richard Blackwood, a collector with connections in the underground classic car world, had offered $150,000 for a full frame-up restoration, enough to clear my debts and finally get my business rolling. I'd spent weeks tracking down original parts, another month rebuilding the engine, and the last 2 weeks polishing every chrome detail until it gleamed. Today was supposed to be the final inspection before delivery, a chance to prove my shop was worth the investment. Instead, I was watching the product of 3 months' worth of 16-hour days get destroyed by a 5'4" real estate agent with rage issues. Valerie King stood over the wreckage in a sharp red power suit, looking like a cardinal attacking its own reflection. At 45, she'd built a reputation as the iron-fisted HOA president who could bring grown men to tears over mailbox colors. Her King Realty signs were plastered across every street corner of Lakewood Hills, the upscale, lakefront neighborhood where I'd bought the smallest house with the biggest mortgage. Few people knew her past. She'd once poured her life savings into a vintage car dealership, only to lose everything when it went bankrupt in 2019. Since then, she'd harbored a personal vendetta against anyone making money from classic cars, especially if they did it in her neighborhood. "This eyesore is tanking property values," she snarled, gripping the tire iron like a medieval mace. "I don't care what kind of permit you think you have, no commercial vehicles in a residential zone." She smashed the passenger side mirror clean off, each swing precise, almost practiced. This wasn't her first time. Behind her sat a gleaming white Mercedes S-Class, with a fresh scratch along the driver's side. She kept glancing at her watch, like she was counting down to something. I just stood there, staring at the crumpled hood, the spiderwebbed windshield, and the once perfect candy apple red paint now looking like it had gone a few rounds with a baseball bat. Years of rescue work had taught me to stay sharp under pressure and to spot when someone's performance wasn't what it seemed. Valerie wasn't having a meltdown, she was recording the whole thing on her phone, framing each shot like a director, narrating her reasons for the damage. This wasn't random drama, it was calculated. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Lane, travel vlogger, 80,000 subscribers. "Hey, why does your car's GPS show it heading south toward downtown? Thought you were home." I looked from the message to Valerie, who was now pretending to call for help loud enough for the gathering neighbors to hear. "Yes, this is an emergency. I need a tow truck at 42 Maple Street immediately. There's an abandoned commercial vehicle blocking residential access." That's when it clicked. This wasn't just vandalism, it was the first move in a bigger game. What she didn't know was that every high-value restoration in my shop came with a hidden, commercial-grade GPS tracker, tucked behind the dashboard and pinging location data to my phone every 30 seconds. If Lainey's message said my car was moving south while Valerie was here swinging a tire iron, that meant someone else was already driving my Mustang away. The tow truck she'd called wasn't on its way, it had already come and gone. The tracker showed my Mustang heading straight for the industrial district, home to Miller's Salvage Yard, a sprawling graveyard of twisted steel run by Jake Miller, my old rescue partner. If my car was going there, it meant one of two things. They had legitimate paperwork, a broken bar, or someone had paid Jake enough to look the other way. With Valerie still here putting on her show, my money was on the second option. I forced a polite smile. "Ma'am, I'm just going to step aside to call my insurance company about a broken bar incident." She smirked like she'd already won. But while I dialed Jake with one hand, I was setting my counterattack in motion with the other. Jake's yard had a strict rule. Any unauthorized vehicle on the lot could be impounded and held until cleared. And Jake owed me more favors than he could count. "Jake, it's Ethan. I need you to do me a favor right now. There's a white Mercedes S-Class in front of my place, plates VK 2021. Owner just vandalized a client's car. Can you tow it and hold it as evidence within the hour?" I watched her face change from smug victory to puzzled suspicion before she could even hang up her fake emergency call. Valerie froze for a moment, clearly struggling to process what she just overheard. "Perfect, and Jake," I added, "make sure you handle this one exactly by the book and unclaimed vehicle protocols and all. I have a hunch this is going to require the full process." By the time I ended the call, she was still standing there, tire iron in hand, trying to figure out how her carefully orchestrated plan had suddenly gone sideways. The neighbors were murmuring among themselves, and across the street, Mrs. Patterson was filming the entire scene on her tablet with the glee of someone who lived for neighborhood gossip. In less than an hour and a half, Valerie King would learn the first rule of local turf wars: the one with the right allies wins. But before that, she needed to understand that her outburst was just my opening move. "I hope your insurance is solid, Miss King," I said as a yellow tow truck appeared at the far end of the street. "You're going to need it." Jake's truck rolled up like clockwork, and the moment he started hooking her Mercedes to the lift, the look on Valerie's face shifted from smug to furious. "You can't just take my car," she shouted, running toward the truck. "This is theft." Jake didn't miss a beat. He had an official impound order in hand, signed for evidence collection in a vandalism case. That's the beauty of having friends in the salvage business. They know every legal back road for getting problem vehicles off the street. And right now, Valerie's Mercedes was the definition of a high-value problem. While her car disappeared down the block, I opened my tracking app. The red dot marking my Mustang was still heading toward Miller's salvage yard. About 20 minutes later, Jake called with an update. "You're not going to believe this, Ethan. Your Mustang just came in with paperwork signed by none other than Valerie King, on Lakewood Hills property management letterhead. It's marked for immediate scrap processing, a triple pay for same-day crushing." I could hear the disbelief in his voice. In 30 years, I've never seen someone so eager to destroy a valuable classic car. Either she doesn't know what she's got, or she's hiding something. Before I could respond, my phone buzzy. Delaney was live streaming from Miller's yard. She'd been there filming content when my Mustang rolled in, and now her 80,000 followers were watching in real time as my car was prepped for the crusher. Comments were pouring in, outrage spreading fast. Within minutes, #Save the Mustang was trending locally, and the stream had thousands of viewers. Jake's mention of the property management company clicked something in my mind. "Check your files," I told him as I pulled into the gravel lot. "How many cars have you processed from Lakewood Hills in the past year?" The long pause on the other end told me enough. On a broken bar, about 25. All authorized by the same office. All marked for immediate processing. All paying extra to rush the job. When I arrived, Jake laid the invoices out on his desk. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the dates. "Every owner moved out within 2 months of the tow. That's no coincidence. This is systematic." The records showed the activity ramping up over the last 3 years. First a few random vehicles, then multiple per month. The most damning evidence was parked in his own impound lot. 4 cars with Lakewood Hills stickers that had supposedly been abandoned but were in pristine condition. "She tells people their cars were removed for violations," Jake explained, "then sells them to me for scrap at a fraction of their value. A $25,000 Mercedes C-Class for $3,000. Then I'm told to crush it immediately." We walked past a BMW, 2 Audis, and a Lexus, all looking showroom ready. That's when Marcus Williams, my quiet, perfect lawn neighbor, appeared. "Ethan," he said lowly, "you need to be careful. There are people watching what's going on here, and they're not the kind you want to cross." "What kind of people?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "Let's just say Valerie has friends you don't want as enemies." Instead of scaring me off, it only confirmed that I'd stumbled into something far bigger than an HOA grudge match. Laney's stream had ballooned to 15,000 viewers, and the comments were filling with similar stories: retirees, veterans, regular folks whose cars had vanished under the same kind of violation pretenses. This was part of a larger, organized scam. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. Valerie's voice, calm, cold, nothing like the screeching HOA president from earlier, came through. "Mr. Cole," she said, "we should talk about a mutually beneficial arrangement. You return my car, and forget what you think you've uncovered. In exchange, I'll make sure your business gets a broken bar lucrative opportunities. Refuse, and I promise you'll regret it." I hung up without a word. Jake gave me a wary look. "Ethan, what have you stepped into?" Before I could answer, he pointed toward the far end of the lot. There, in a red power suit, stood Valerie right beside the crusher controls, talking to Jake's night shift supervisor. "I hate to say it," Jake muttered, "but it looks like she's just upped the stakes in a big way." Valerie stood at the crusher controls, holding what looked like official paperwork, while Jake's night shift supervisor, Tommy, scratched his head and refused to budge. "Ma'am," Tommy drawled in his slow southern accent, "I don't care if you're the Queen of England and no one crushes a classic muscle car on my watch without proper clearance." Her frustration was boiling over, and I could see her mentally weighing whether to keep arguing or simply throw more cash at the problem. She didn't get the chance to choose yet because Jake made a discovery that shifted everything. While she was busy trying to browbeat Tommy, Jake had been quietly combing through her white Mercedes with the meticulous care of a man who's spent decades uncovering automotive mysteries. "Ethan, you need to see this." "Now," he called, his voice carrying that no-nonsense tone I'd only heard in our most serious rescue operations. I hurried to the impound area, where Jake popped open the trunk. Wedged between the spare tire and a set of jumper cables sat a banker's box filled with 47 manila folders. Each one had a Lakewood Hills address scrawled on the tab, and inside was what looked like insurance claim paperwork. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Every document was riddled with forged signatures, manipulated accident reports, and padded repair estimates. Minor fender benders magically inflated into total losses. "Look at this pattern," I told Jake, spreading the files across his desk. Outside, Laney's live stream kept rolling, but in here, the picture was clear. Valerie had been running double claims, collecting from both the car owner's policy and the hose coverage for neighborhood damage. The numbers were staggering, payouts from 15 to 60 grand, all funneled through different adjusters to keep them off the radar. Then came the real smoking gun. Beneath the stack of insurance files sat a handwritten ledger, a master list tracking every stolen car, every family forced out of the neighborhood, and every dollar pocketed. The entries stretched back 3 years. Beside each name were notes like, "Carter family persuaded to relocate after garage incident," and "Rodriguez family expedited departure after pool equipment malfunction." The cold detachment in her writing made my skin crawl. She wasn't just running a scam, she was managing human lives like inventory. I started snapping photos of the worst evidence when my phone rang. The voice on the other end was older, firm, and carried the confidence of someone who had spent decades dismantling corporate lies. "Mr. Cole," the woman said, "I'm Patricia Murphy. I believe you've just uncovered something I've been tracking for the last 2 years. She explained she was a retired insurance investigator who'd moved into Lakewood Hills under the guise of a harmless retiree, altogether proof of Valerie's schemes. "My grandson was one of her victims," Patricia said. "I have security footage of her sabotaging vehicles, recordings of her talking to complicit adjusters, and a money trail that would hold up in court. I've just been waiting for the right partner to bring her down." Her crown jewel, a high-quality video of Valerie pouring brake fluid into the Carter family's garage, an intentional chemical sabotage that forced them to sell their home at a massive loss. "She's not just committing fraud," Patricia told me, holding out her tablet so I could see. "She's driving people out to control the real estate market." The video looked professionally, showed up Patricia had invested serious money into this operation. Meanwhile, Valerie had abandoned her crusher plan and switched tactics. She was now on the phone, reporting Jake's salvage yard to the police as a front for stolen cars, so hoping a raid would wipe out the evidence before we could use it. "She's desperate," Jake muttered, watching her pace outside. "People like her make their biggest mistakes when they start scrambling." Sure enough, desperation drove her next move straight into felony territory. While we were inside, she'd set up a Moria broken bar direct approach. My phone buzzed Delaney's text, "Bro, some guy with a gas can is walking toward your workshop. Pretty sure he's not here to mow the lawn." A chill ran through me. Valerie was shifting from property damage to arson. Dangerous, absolutely, but it also meant she was panicking and making sloppy, emotional choices instead of calculated ones. "That gave us a chance, Patricia," I said, sliding the most damning documents into my bag while keeping one eye on Valerie through the office window. "How do you feel about catching her committing a felony broken bar live?" The slow, satisfied smile that spread across her face told me she'd been waiting years to hear those words. We started making plans to head back to my place. As we were preparing to leave, Jake pulled me aside, his expression grim. "Ethan, that woman out there just offered me 50 grand in cash to pretend none of this ever happened." he said quietly. If someone's tossing that kind of money around, it means they've got far more to lose than we imagined. But Valerie was past the point of buying her way out. Patricia Murphy had already handed me the leverage we needed to dismantle her entire operation. The sharp stench of gasoline hit me before we even turned onto Maple Street. My stomach tightened when I saw the workshop's front door yawning open, and a shimmering puddle spreading across the concrete floor. Valerie King had just made a fatal miscalculation. If you're going to try arson, don't target someone who's spent years in industrial rescue training. My shop had automatic sprinklers tied to motion sensors, precisely for moments like this. The second her hired goon started sloshing fuel around the restoration bay, the system unleashed a torrent that drowned the flames before they were ever lit. By the time Patricia, Jake, and I arrived, Valerie stood in my driveway, screeching at a soaked young man who looked like he'd rather disappear than face her wrath. "You useless idiot!" she barked, her voice carrying clearly to the growing crowd of onlookers. "I paid you $5,000 to burn a garage, not take a shower." Dripping from head to toe, the man muttered about some kind of automatic fire thing, but the damage to Valerie's plan was already done. What she didn't know was that my security cameras had captured every moment of her detailed instructions, the handoff of cash, and his clumsy confidence all in crystal clear HD. Patricia, ever the seasoned investigator, didn't hesitate. She phoned the police immediately, but then turned to the gathered neighbors with a declaration that shifted the entire tone of our fight. "My name is Patricia Murphy," she said, her voice sharp and steady. "I'm a retired senior investigator for Continental Insurance, and I'm officially founding the Lakewood Truth Alliance." Within minutes, over a dozen families had formed a semicircle around her as she laid out the scope of Valerie's crimes. This wasn't random misconduct, this was a structured, years-long operation targeting residents methodically. Patricia assigned roles on the spot. The Rodriguez family would handle social media, the Thompsons would oversee legal filings, and Mrs. Patterson, whose house had an unobstructed view of Key Streets, would serve as communications coordinator with her arsony live recording devices. "This isn't just about stopping one person's power trip," Patricia told the crowd. "We're dismantling a network that's been stealing from our community for 3 years." Then came the most surprising twist of the evening. Marcus Williams, who had always been cagey about his employment, stepped forward. His voice was calm but carried weight. "I think it's time I tell you who I really am. I'm Special Agent Marcus Williams with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I've been investigating a multi-state money laundering operation, and Valerie's scheme is part of it." The collective gasp was almost comical. Marcus explained that for 18 months, the Bureau had been tracking an organized network using HOA disputes and inflated insurance claims to funnel illicit funds into real estate. Our situation had just given them the last pieces they needed. Meanwhile, Laney's live stream had transformed into a near-professional news broadcast. Tens of thousands of viewers were watching, many from other states, sharing eerily similar HOA corruption stories and posting their own evidence. "This isn't just a Lakewood Hills problem," she told her growing audience. "This is a coordinated, nationwide scam." Valerie, however, wasn't backing down. Her phone conversations had grown urgent and dangerous sounding. "I don't care what it costs," she was overheard saying. "I need this problem handled tonight or before it spreads." The tone was enough to make Marcus call for immediate federal backup. Then Patricia dropped another bombshell. Valerie had been deliberately poisoning the decorative koi ponds of families who refused to sell, using industrial bleaching agents traced directly to her purchases. The evidence was ironclad: chemical matches, receipts, and witness statements. "She's not just after money," Patricia told the crowd. "She's destroying what people love to break their attachment to their homes." As dusk settled over the neighborhood, Valerie made one last gamble. Using the HOA's official messaging system, she announced an emergency meeting for the following evening. "Tomorrow night at 7, her message read, "We'll vote on emergency measures to remove dangerous elements from our community." What she didn't know was that the Truth Alliance was already 3 moves ahead. The Truth Alliance had already anticipated Valerie's so-called emergency meeting, and what she believed would be her moment of control was destined to become the scene of her complete undoing. As the crowd began to break up that evening, Marcus pulled me aside. His tone was measured, but there was a trace of satisfaction in his eyes. "Ethan," he said, "tomorrow night is the climax of an 18-month federal investigation. You ready to help us nail a money laundering operation red-handed?" Looking around at my neighbors, people who had gone from scattered, intimidated individuals to a united front for justice, I knew Valerie had made the most damaging miscalculation of her career. She had underestimated what happens when a community refuses to be bullied. The Lakewood Hills Community Center had never seen anything like it. What should have been a simple HOA administrative meeting looked more like a public trial. The room, designed for 50, overflowed with more than 200 residents, many of them standing shoulder to shoulder. Outside, 3 news vans idled in the parking lot, drawn there by Laney's now viral live stream, which had exploded past 100,000 viewers worldwide. Patricia Murphy had spent the day directing Truth Alliance families, ensuring every piece of evidence was neatly sorted and ready to present. Marcus, still posing as an ordinary neighbor, had quietly arranged for federal agents to be stationed throughout the building. Valerie made her entrance fashionably late, stepping out of a sleek black town car that screamed expensive legal counsel, flanked by 2 high-priced attorneys who probably billed more per hour than some folks earned in a month. But whatever effect she'd hoped for evaporated the moment she stepped into a room full of residents she had threatened or swindled, many clutching folders of evidence against her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began with forced confidence, "we're here tonight to address dangerous criminal elements in our peaceful neighborhood." The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially since her own hired arsonist was sitting in jail after his botched attempt to torch my workshop. Her lawyers wasted no time in revealing their defense strategy: discredit me. They painted me as a reckless outsider who had brought criminal influences into Lakewood Hills. They paraded photos of Jake's salvage yard, twisted my employment history into a liability, and played selectively edited security footage meant to make my friendship with Jake look like part of a stolen vehicle ring. "This so-called restoration business is a cover for illegal operations," one attorney declared, claiming I was a danger to property values and public safety. But Patricia Murphy had spent 4 decades dismantling false narratives like this. As soon as they finished, she stood and addressed the crowd with the calm authority of someone who'd been in more courtrooms than most lawyers. "Thank you for that work of fiction," she said, her voice slicing through the tension. "Now, let's talk about the actual threats to this neighborhood." From her briefcase, she produced the 47 insurance fraud files recovered from Valerie's Mercedes AE, each detailing a separate scheme targeting a family in the neighborhood. When she began reading Valerie's own handwritten ledger aloud, the atmosphere shifted from curiosity to outrage. Carter family persuaded to relocate after the garage incident. Rodriguez family departure expedited after pool equipment malfunction. Thompson family convinced to sell after basement water damage. Each cold, methodical entry was a record of sabotage disguised as misfortune, all designed to drive families out for profit. One by one, the victims spoke. Mrs. Carter described her garage mysteriously flooding with brake fluid, which Valerie had brushed off as an accident until Patricia produced footage proving it was intentional. The Rodriguez family shared how their pool equipment had failed 3 times in 2 months, each breakdown followed by Valerie suggesting they move somewhere less troublesome. The Thompsons told of a sudden basement flood, quickly followed by an unsolicited offer from Valerie to help them relocate. By the time they were done, even Valerie's attorneys looked uneasy. Her composure cracked. "This is fabricated, evidence planted by criminals," she shouted, accusing the residents of conspiring to ruin her. But Patricia, still recording, let her words serve as proof of the evidence's authenticity. The real turning point came when Marcus rose to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "this meeting is under federal surveillance as part of an ongoing money laundering investigation." The room went silent, all eyes snapping toward Valerie. The revelation from the FBI peeled back the last veneer of Valerie's composure. Rather than insisting on her innocence or demanding a lawyer, she snatched up her phone and began urgently dialing contacts of people whose tone and language suggested they were far from law-abiding. "The operation's blown," she said loudly enough for half the room to hear. "Initiate cleanup protocol now." Marcus kept his camera trained on her, subtly signaling his team, who were already positioning themselves at exits to prevent any escape. Moments later, The HOA's vote was swift and devastating. 198 residents in favor of removing Valerie from every position of authority. Not a single vote in her favor. The fallout was immediate. 23 families declared they would jointly file a class action lawsuit for the harassment and financial damage she had caused. Early estimates of potential damages reached over $4 million, even before factoring in criminal penalties. As the crowd began to settle, Valerie tried one last desperate tactic, threatening to burn the neighborhood to the ground if anyone pursued legal action. Before her words could land, the sound of car doors slamming outside drew everyone's attention. FBI agents in tactical gear were moving into position around the community center.